Hello, welcome back to another video. My name is Gemma and today I'm going to be trying to predict which books are going to be longlisted for this year's International Booker Prize. So for those that don't know, the International Booker Prize is a pretty long-standing, well-regarded literary prize which awards recognition to the best novel in translation that has been published over the last year. The eligibility dates for this one are the 1st of May 2024 to the 30th of April 2025. So there is a decent chance that there will be books that aren't available yet when the long list is announced on the 25th of Feb. And also the shortlist isn't announced until the shortlist is announced on the 8th of April. So if so there's a possibility that there will be books that are published after the shortlist is announced, which is a little annoying, but there we go. It can be translated from any language and both the author and the translator are recognised, and I have really enjoyed this prize in the past. I would love to read more from it. Unfortunately, it directly overlaps with the Women's Prize and so I don't always get to many of them. But it does highlight world literature from so many different countries and there's always books on there that I've never come across before, and so I'm really excited to see what makes the list in a couple of weeks on the 25th. And so I've put together a list of 13 books. The International Booker Long List always comprises of 12 or 13 books. You never quite know, but usually it is 13. So I've picked 13 books in translation that have been published within the eligibility window, and we'll see if I get them right. If not, I'm just highlighting some amazing translated literature or some amazing sounding translated literature from the last year into this year. And yeah, I have not read any of these books, but I'm very keen to read most of them. Some of them I've put on purely because I think they're Booker catnip, but possibly not Gemma catnip. So we'll cover those when we get to them. But let's just get straight on with the books because there's 13 to talk about and I don't want this video to be hours long. So the first book that I've put on my list is Bad Habit by Alana S. Portero, which is translated by Amara Faye Letham and was published on the 23rd of May 2024 and is translated from Spanish. This one is 240 pages and is a coming of age story about a young trans woman, I believe in Madrid, and it explains identity and the power of found family. It sounds really interesting. I quite like reading books about the trans experience. I think it's quite eye-opening and I think it's important that there's a lot of literature out there on it, and I don't think I've ever read a book about the trans experience that is translated, so this will be a first for me. So yes, very excited for that one and I'm going to be getting to that one quite soon. I know that I saw it crop up on Simon Savage's Best Books of the Year from Savage Reads, so that automatically puts it in my want to read pile. Next up, I have a book that is translated from the Dutch, and we have hard copy by Fien Veldman, translated by Hester Velmans, and this was published on the 6th of June 2024 and is 256 pages. And this sounds bizarre, so this is one of the ones that I mentioned at the beginning where I put it on because I think it sounds bookery, but I'm not sure if it sounds gemmery. And this is, I think the strapline is something like Girl Meets Printer. So a girl who's working in a printing shop, I guess in the Netherlands, but I don't actually know. And she's quite lonely, she doesn't have any friends. She starts to talk to and confide in the printer where she works. And her boss thinks she's got a bit loopy and so puts her on leave and she is separated from her beloved printer, and then it goes from there. Sounds weird. Sounds very, very weird, which is definitely not a barrier to the International Booker, so I wonder if we'll see that on the list. Next up I have Living Things by Munir Hachemi, translated by Julia Sanchez from the Spanish. This was published on the 20th of June 2024 and is a tiddler at 116 pages. Julia Sanchez is a translator that I've definitely heard of before, so I wouldn't be super surprised to see this on the list. But this sounds quite interesting. It's about 4 graduates who travel to the south of France. They're originally going to work on a vineyard, but then things happen and they end up working in this sort of industrial chicken farm. And then I think it's sort of a meditation on farming living things and employment and consumerism, and those are all topics that really appeal to me. And I think it could be quite powerful in quite a short novel, so I'm really keen to read that one. Next up, I have Untold Lessons by Maddalena Vaglio Tanet, translated by Jill Foulston from the Italian. This one was published on the 12th of September 2024 and is 272 pages. And this one is a literary thriller, which sometimes works for me and sometimes doesn't. But this one sounds like it's a really interesting premise about a teacher who, following the death of one of her pupils, sort of disappears into the woods. And I think we get an element of nature writing and darkness and gothicness from that section, is my vibe from the blurb. But also, while that's happening back in the town where she teaches, they are discovering things about this teacher and it gets a bit sort of sinister. And that sounds great. I really want to read that. Next, I have A Man With No Title by Xavier Le Clerk, translated from the French by William Rodamor. And this is 128 pages. And Le Clerk is an Algerian author, and he is writing about an Algerian man living in France, not really coping, sort of reliving memories of the war and having just generally quite a traumatic time of it. And then this man's son discovers some articles written by Albert Camus, and there is sort of this link back to his father and some trauma that his father went through, and sort of it then turns into this sort of discovery of generational trauma and that sort of thing. And I just think that sounds fabulous. I love sort of the multi-generational aspects. I love looking at generational trauma. I think it's a really interesting topic to go into, and yeah, I think it could be quite hard-hitting as well, which is definitely a me book. Next up, and this one does sound quite wacky, but I am actually there for it this time, and it's a book called Dengue Boy by Michael Nieva, translated from the Spanish by Rachel Bery. This is due to be published on the 20th of February and is 224 pages. Nieva is, I believe, an Argentinian author, certainly South American. And this book is sci-fi, but literary sci-fi for sure. It takes place in 2272. Most of the world is underwater, including Buenos Aires, New York, and most people are living on the Patagonian archipelago. And our protagonist, the titular character of the Dengue Boy, is a humanoid mosquito. Yes, you heard that right. And is pretty much repulses everybody in his life, including his own mother. But he is really striving to understand like the meaning of life and why things are the way they are, and humanity is basically heading for a nosedive, and he wants to try and do something about it, but the people around him don't. The adults are more concerned with speculating on the stock market in the face of disaster, and most of the children are just plugged into like violent VR video games. And so Dengue Boy is sort of on his own trying to do something about the climate crisis and the end of the world, basically. So that sounds fabulous. Really want to read that. Then next, my 7th prediction is Command Performance by Jean Echenoz, which is translated from the French by Marc Polizzotti. This is due to be published on the 11th of March and is 256 pages. And this is about a disgraced flight attendant who wants to sort of try his hand at private detective work. So there's like an element of like amateur sleuth going on here, but he sort of falls in with a political crowd and then ends up doing things that perhaps aren't very ethical, I believe. So sounds interesting. I don't read a lot of detective-y books, so I would probably wait and see what the consensus is on this, if it gets some hype. But yeah, I think that could be on the list. My next prediction is one I'm really excited for. It's Under the Eye of the Big Bird by Hiromi Kawakami, translated by Asa Yoneda from Spanish, and was published on the 16th of January and is 234 pages. So Hiromi Kawakami is a pretty famous Japanese author. They wrote Strange Weather in Tokyo, which I have on my shelves but I have not read yet, and this is their latest release, and it sounds bizarre but fabulous. And this one is also sci-fi and quite similar in themes to the Dengue Boy book, so whether both of these will make it or not is speculation. This is set in the future and humanity is on the verge of extinction. New children come along by being bred in factories from the cells of rabbits and dolphins, or sort of grown like plants with light and water. And these different sort of factions of humanity have all clumped into clans, and the survival of the human race is dependent on interbreeding between these different sort of species, alien species, I suppose, of human. But I think it then goes into discrimination, and will people of different origins, different castes, if you will they interbreed? And I think it looks at the human condition and the things that make us human, and sort of repeating mistakes throughout humanity, and it sounds brilliant. Next up I have Gifted by Suzumi Suzuki, which is translated from the Japanese by Alison Markham Powell, and was published on the 1st of October. This is really small, 76 pages, so I don't know if the international booker has a minimum page count limit or word count limit, so this might not fall into the eligibility window, but it sounded really good, so I've included it. And this looks at a mother-daughter relationship. So we follow the daughter. She is working as a hostess in the nightlife district of, I believe, Tokyo, and her mother, who she is estranged from, sort of rocks up and says that she's dying. And it looks at that mother-daughter relationship, it looks at sex work, it looks at stigma, and yeah, I just think that sounds like it could be super powerful if it's written well in that short number of pages. It could really punch you in the face, you know, so I think that's got potential. Next up I have Elephant Herd by Zhang Guizing, translated from the Chinese by Carlos Rojas, and this was translated on the 14th of January and is 243 pages. And in this we follow a young boy who is searching for his uncle, who is the leader of a communist guerrilla group, and he is searching for him in the Sarawak rainforest in northern Borneo. So he's travelling through this rainforest to try and find his uncle, and it's about the perils that he faces along the way, both ecological and political, and I think that just sounds really good. So I'd love to see that on the list. Okay, 2 more to go, and the last 2 on my list I think are going to be the most likely. I think everything up to now has been less well known, but these next 2 I would be highly surprised if you hadn't heard of them. The first is We Do Not Part by Han Kang, our latest Nobel laureate, and her book is translated from the Korean by Paige Anya Morris and is due to be released on the 6th of February and is 371 pages. And this is about a woman who travels from Seoul to the Jeju Islands. Her friend has wronged her, he is sick, he is dying, and he wants her to come over and look after his bird. And as she arrives on the island, a snowstorm hits, and she is trying to make her way to her friend to save this bird, but she's in a snowstorm, she might die, and it all sounds very dramatic. I'm expecting a level of weird because it's Han Kang, but yeah, super hyped for this. Can't wait to get to it. I will definitely be reading this regardless of whether it is longlisted for the book or not. And finally, we have the Imposium by Olga Tokarczuk, translated from the Polish by Antonia Lloyd-Jones. This was published on the 26th of September last year and is 321 pages. And this looks at a sort of a health resort where a guy with TB goes when he is obviously poorly, and it's about the interaction between all of the residents or patients, whatever you want to call them, in this health house. But then things start to get a bit creepy. The house is a bit weird. It feels like someone's watching them. I think there's dark elements to it. And this is Tokarczuk's response to The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. It's about that environment, but if this was set there. So I have heard a lot of praise for this book. Tokarczuk has been nominated and won the International Booker before, so it wouldn't be so much of a surprise to see her there again this year. And that is for 13. That is for 13. So I'm curious to know if you guys have read any of these, or if you have any additions that you think I have missed from my list that you think will definitely be nominated, or that you would like to see nominated. I would love to know that. On a side note, I am a big book prize fan. So I predominantly follow the Women's Prize. That's the big one that I follow. And myself and my friend Charlie Brooke at Charlie Brooke Reads are running the Women's Prize plot along this year, where we talk about the Women's Prize long-listed books, short-listed books and winners throughout the course of the Women's Prize season. And if you missed it in Charlie's most recent video, we are doing bookmarks this year, and all of the money that is raised from the bookmarks will be going to the National Book Trust. And so I thought I'd show you the bookmark, my bookmark. We both have a bookmark, and there's one for Jack and one for our friend Alice, who died last year, who was also heavily involved. But I just thought I'd show you my bookmark. They will be available from the 12th of February on Etsy, so I will link the Etsy shop below, but this is my bookmark. As I said, there are 3 other designs, so if you want to go ahead and support the National Book Trust and support the Women's Prize Plod Along and prizes in general, then please do so when that is open on the 12th of Feb. And yes, I think that was all I had from an announcement perspective. And if you're interested to see the books that I predicted for the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction long list, I'll leave that video here, and I will see you all very soon with another one. Bye guys.